Deborah is a cultural and special education consultant. She is a third-generation African American Albertan whose grandparents immigrated to Alberta in the early 1900s from Oklahoma, Illinois, Missouri, and Texas. She's the CEO of Shiloh Centre for Multicultural Roots, a non-for-profit society that is grounded in the mosaic of rich, inclusive African American Canadian heritage dating as far back as pre-1910, whose mandate is to honor, educate, and celebrate their community with the communities at large. Deborah holds a Bachelor in Education from the University of Alberta and a Master's from the US, and has recently retired from a 30-plus year of teaching and administration career in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Deborah, thank you so much for being with us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Lexi has done a wonderful introduction, so I don't need to even tell you about myself. So I'll just get right into the session today. I was born in Wildwood, and that's where my parents are from. And Wildwood's located 100 kilometers west of Edmonton. And I lived in Wildwood just for a few months, because I guess I was afraid of the animals or something. So that's not the real reason, but we moved to Edmonton, where my dad was able to find work and things like that. In Wildwood, there's still just, there's only one or two Black families that from the original settlement there. And there is a Black cemetery that Shiloh Centre for Multicultural Roots is trying to get the title out because it's been abandoned. But the local people are still trying to take care of it. But SCMR is in the early stages of working toward taking up that responsibility for the restoration and the upkeep of that Black cemetery. Now, Wildwood was known as the first Black settlement, but there were other Black settlements in Alberta, and I know about Saskatchewan, so I'll talk a little bit about that. The other names of the main Black settlements around Alberta and Saskatchewan are Breton, first known as Keystone. It's located about 107 kilometers southwest of Edmonton. It has a museum that features many Black artifacts and family history. In the Barhead area, it was first known as Kempsey. It's located 136 kilometers northwest of Edmonton. And that place is known as the first, well, how Deborah Beaver calls it, she was from there, the first segregated, non-segregated school for Blacks built there in Alberta. Then there's Maidstone, Saskatchewan, where a lot of people that live in Edmonton, they're originally from Maidstone, Saskatchewan. It is just east of Edmonton along the Saskatchewan border. They've restored some of their historical sites, including a church and cemetery. So if ever you go there, you can see that. I'm just going to pause here and just put on my the beginning of the PowerPoint. It just has my title page. I'm going to share that screen with you. There's me with a different hairstyle, but that's still me. We were at Barhead, known as Kempsey, and then Maidstone, Saskatchewan. That place is located 306 kilometers east of Edmonton. And then we get to Amber Valley, which was the largest settlement. And it was first called Pine Creek, and it's located 169 kilometers north of Edmonton. So Amber Valley is located just north of the town of Athabasca. And they have restored and kept up a lot of the Black historical sites there. An interesting place to go. There's a Black museum located right in the community hall, and many of the outbuildings are still standing around that area. They're known as having the greatest baseball team formed in 1928. and they rarely lost a game, except for coming to Edmonton to play the Shiloh Baptist Church team. Yay, go Shiloh. We attended, I'm gonna go to the next screen there. We attended Shiloh Baptist Church, my family, and I'm still a member of that congregation. And we had the privilege of hosting one of the sessions for Paint the Rails right at the church, so people could see some of the historical information there that we have there. So I'm going to share a few things about the church. As I said, that the Kingsway Transit Station mural and most of the contents from the Paint the Rails book refers to the church and historical importance. The church was and still is an important source of strength and foundation for our community. Shortly after Alberta became a province, most of the existing churches in Alberta, specifically Edmonton, had a very negative attitude toward Black persons attending their services or even attending to join their congregation. But ongoing faith, perseverance by the leaders in the Black community to establish a welcoming place for persons, which they used to call us, persons of color, together. That was officially achieved in July 1910 with the formation of Shiloh Baptist Church. And it's regarded as the first Black church in Western Canada. There is a 1925 congregation. And in the middle with the, I guess that's called plaid. She has a hat on. That's my aunt. She recently passed at 101 years old. And she was in our documentary, We Are the Roots. The church served as a community hub and a place of bonding for people. This shared bonding helped them endure discrimination, prejudice, and marginalization, and experiences of those kind of things, and being able to come together and talk about it. It encouraged them to continue to strive for social justice, and Shiloh continues to provide for its congregation and proudly turned 112 years this year. I'm also the founder of the executive director of Shiloh Centre for Multicultural Roots. And you heard about that in my introduction. So I'd like to just highlight a few of our educational resources that SCMR has produced and which may be of interest to you in your class or organization or just personally now or in later years. In 2018, with support from the Alberta Human Rights Commission, I co-produced the documentary We Are the Roots, Black Settlers and Their Experiences of Discrimination on the Prairies. And it focused on the 100+ years of systemic racist actions towards my community, African American Western Canadians. We were invited, we weren't what they expected when we crossed the border from the US to Canada. But we helped this province develop, and all of those challenges and successes and hopes for better times for our future generations are featured in this documentary. Now, in 2020, SCMR collaborated with the Aspen Foundation for Labor Education, and we produced Black Lives in Alberta, Over a Century of Racial Injustice Continues. This was a documentary, and we also produced an accompanying resource, teacher's resource. It's full of excellent bits of information, knowledge for teachers and students alike. There are many activities for teachers and students or people or organizations to go through to gain a greater understanding of the Black lives that have been here for well over 100 years. In this documentary, 5 generations of Black Albertan descendants highlight a few of their experiences of discrimination while living here in their home province. This documentary is different than the first one because we have 4th generation post-secondary graduates share moments of their family histories and discuss how their racial identities have shaped their lives. And in 2021, I produced a small video documentary and a screening guide was produced along with it too. It's entitled Alberta, Growing Up Black. So the Reach organization, along with some other funders, were able to help us produce this one. It features children from ages preschool to young adults sharing candid stories about their family histories, their lives growing up here, mostly in Edmonton, as Black descendants, and words of wisdom for today and future generations also. These young people really said some powerful things. The viewing guide was produced by youth from a summer reach program. And they produced this guide here. It contains information about the producer, her family, and it gives some questions to think about while you're watching the documentary and when you're finished. So it gives a lot of room for and opportunities for discussion. And at the end, it's just a quick bio about the participants there. All three documentaries reinforce the fact that anti-Black racism is running rampant, still here in Edmonton, in Western Canada and Canada. So for the next few minutes, I need you to just sit and watch this documentary.
We have been here for over 100 years, so we should be treated as equal citizens. We're the next generation. We want fairness.
Sorry, I just need to move that top section off. And I thought I could. Just give me one moment, please. So this documentary, as I am looking for something, these children are my grandchildren.
Truth matters, not skin color. Respect matters. I am from here. We are all Canadian, so let's just get along.
Alberta, growing up black.
I was born by the river in a little tent, and just like the river, I've been running ever since.
I am fourth generation Albertan. My great-great paternal grandparents came as freedmen from the United States to help develop Alberta and raise their family in a place they thought was free of discrimination and hate. Prejudice practices based on skin color were and still are present here in Canada. This is a snapshot of our story of the continued systemic racism that has been occurring since Confederation. Fourth and fifth generation descendants of the African American Albertan homesteaders tell their stories in order to encourage dialogue, engagement, and social change, as our African American Albertan community continues to confront anti-Black racism here in Canada 100 years later.
A change gon' come. Oh,
My great-great-grandmother came through way of Oklahoma.
My grandma Mary was born in Beatrix, Arkansas. And so my family on my mom's side comes from Arkansas. My great-grandmother Elda was born also in Arkansas. And so the journey started there in 1910.
My family came from a couple of places, so Oklahoma, Georgia, and then a little bit after that, Texas. They came up here pretty early and were one of the first people in Athabasca. I know they came up by horse carriage with a horse wagon, so I know that was a long journey to come up here.
I did a little bit of research on my grandma's side and found out that there's family that came from Oklahoma and Louisiana And there's also roots dating back from 1863 from the Trail of Tears, which is the Aboriginal side of my grandma's side of the family.
She was one of 9 kids, and so after the mother passed away, everyone kind of split up. So she kind of was on her own.
He was a stonemason and a bricklayer, and he actually had to leave his children at home while he went and worked because there was no programs for that.
My great-grandmother was a bit of a gambler, so she traveled all over the States. And then they returned briefly to Arkansas in the 1940s, but she had to leave because she got into a fight with a white man and she slapped him in his face. And basically, she was kind of chased out by a mob.
My grandpa was a welder. He came to Edmonton in 1947. He owned a mechanic shop. He owned a welding shop. He was a jack of all trades. This stool actually is something that he made.
My grandma Mary was an extraordinary woman. She would always talk to me about having character, the importance of character, and she talked about working in an establishment where she was the only black woman pretty much that worked at the Bull Street at that time and had quite a large caseload. And she would, tell me stories as young as 4 years old about what she would face in those situations and, not being always treated with respect or kind of, getting called slurs or whatnot.
He never spoke much, but when he did, it was always important. He went to another room and cried when Martin Luther King passed away.
I was born here in Edmonton, Alberta.
I was born here in Edmonton, Alberta.
I was born in Edmonton, Alberta at the Misericordia Hospital.
Edmonton, Alberta.
I was born in Edmonton, Alberta.
I was born on a small island in the south of Thailand.
Yeah, so I went to a couple of different elementaries as a kid, but regardless, every class I was in, I was the only black person. And that actually was the case all the way through high school.
I was the darkest in the school for a while. I was darker than this because of the sun and all that. But my family made it a point to call me Aidam. That was how they referenced me. That roughly translates to like darky or blacky. And I'd laugh it off. Obviously they'd laugh it off too. But deep down, that kind of like, that makes you feel like you're not in the place you're supposed to be, especially by like the people that are supposed to love you.
Growing up, there was me and about 2 other black kids and an East Indian child who were in our class. And there were times where other kids would make comments, because I wore my hair out natural a lot when I was a kid and so did the other kids. And we get called kinky heads and things like that. And at that time, I thought it was funny. We just kind of laughed just to kind of go along to fit along, right?
It was hard. I used to get called Poodle, Dr. Poodle, Donkey Kong, because my initials were DK.
I definitely got called names growing up into my teenage years.
I was bullied a lot because of my skin color.
When I got to junior high school, I had a kid tell me that I should go back to my cotton picking fields, and he called me the N-word.
I grew up playing hockey for a bit. At first my parents didn't want me to play hockey, but I convinced them. It took a while. It took a lot of convincing, but got into the team. I think for all the years I played, I was usually the only black kid on my team. Most of the teams were okay with it. I feel like they treated me okay. But playing against different teams across Alberta, across Canada, and across the US, you definitely could sense some hate from other teams, other players and oppositions.
High school wasn't as bad for that part because there was more multicultural kids, like more multicultural families and stuff in the school by high school.
I went to school in St. Albert. Not the most diverse city of Alberta. And so I went there and I came across kind of the same thing, but not to the point where it's like I'm alienated. because they're more socialized to accept like all types of races. But it was more of like they were pointing out the fact that I was a white black. Like they touched base and they're like, you're not a real black. You're an Asian. Like they were identifying me for myself, you know. And I don't know how I felt about that. They're like, you're Asian. You don't look black.
Some of the staff, we had quite a bit of issues with the staff. Just in the way they treated us. A couple of my friend groups got in trouble a bunch of times for stuff we did just because we looked like someone else that did it, and they didn't really address it after that. They said just brush it off.
The other instance I can think of is when they're like, can you say the N-word? When they bring up the fact that, and it's always a difficult topic because I myself don't know if I can say that, but I don't want to, you know. And they'd say it around me, and then they'd make it a point to point out the fact that I didn't say anything. Yeah, I don't know, it was difficult. It was difficult.
I would have to defend myself and sometimes others, depending on the situation. But I never really had never called an N-word or anything like that. It was just more, about my hair or, my skin color sometimes. Oh, you're really dark, right? So things like that. But other than that, I just took every day one day at a time and just kept on going.
And I was used as like a diversity symbol for the school. So I was present in all the pamphlets and the headers, and I felt like they're kind of using the fact that I was a little darker as a selling point or a marketing point. And I don't know how I felt about that, but in retrospect, it's not the best thing.
Little common things you hear in Alberta growing up as a colored person is that that racism doesn't happen here, and people aren't dying here in the same way.
It's tough to see your dad or I guess any figures you have in your life, I wouldn't say, or role models you have in your life struggle, and it's hard to see that as a kid.
Hailing taxis and things like that, if I called one, they would ask me for a deposit first, and maybe I only had debit. I didn't have cash on me, they wouldn't take me.
There was one time I was at the St. Albert Mall when I still lived at home in St. Albert, and I was in the bay with my friend, and we were followed by a security guard. There's just the fact I'm walking into a store not even 5 minutes and I'm being accused of stealing something because of the color of my skin.
I've been a chef for the past 10 years about, and there was definitely times where I felt like I've been overlooked for a position because I didn't fit quite their mold. When
I worked for the school board, I would go through a lot of problems with a lot of the staff in the school. A lot of times I was usually one of the few black people that worked in the school.
Was only one colored person working in the front of house for about 5 years, and it usually seems to be like that. There's only one at a time, not two. And I mean, when I say colored, I mean colored, not just black. There was only one colored person working, and there was none in managerial positions in my restaurant, and the representation definitely wasn't equal, I felt. There's a situation that really shaped me was with my late cousin, Keaton Otis. In 2010, he was murdered by the police, and I'd always hear about these situations happening in the States, to other black families, and the kind of not really paying any mind to it until it happened to me. And so being able to walk in those families' shoes and being able to understand where they're coming from and that frustration. But also after Keaton passed away, I found out that we had some of that same stuff that happened to our family members in the South as well, by the Ku Klux Klan, hunted them, hunted people down and murdered them. I think the recent cultural, social movement that's been going on has been letting people like know that there's different degrees of racism, and it's quite systemic in Canada as well as US as to what's happening. So just being able to be more vocal about it without fear of, first of all, people not understanding or wanting to hear, I think has been a good thing in the most recent past.
All of those experiences, I think you don't really know how to cope with them. I think it's ingrained in our DNA to some degree, just to kind of, go through the process, but, keep up and pick up and keep on going.
I always tell my kids, people might look at you different, especially like I have one son and 3 girls. And so I always instill that in him because he's a black male. And it's usually a lot of the problems that I find happen with black males because they get labeled with that stigma all the time.
I've had to talk to them about, being aware of where you are and understanding certain situations, wherever you're at, and being just alert. And they don't always understand, because they're kids, so talking to them about some of these issues can be confusing, but they do understand, their history and where they come from. And unfortunately, these things that we still deal with till this very day, but you still have to, be aware, be alert, and just, show up and continue to fight.
Yeah, things like that. You definitely deal with things growing up in Alberta, in the prairies, as a colored person. I'd say that they are who they are, and that nothing can change that. Like, the words of other people shouldn't resonate that much with you, and I think that it's important for them to have a support system that encourages them to live their cultures out and to prosper.
And if I could say one thing to these little kids now is be yourself. Don't let the media, don't let these racial comments, don't let anybody tell you any different. You can be whoever you want to be.
But, you just, like my grandma always said, character is important. So even when people are making fun of you or trying to put you down, you just have to say, you know what, it is what it is. I'm proud of my hair and all of who I am, and just continue to rise and to shine.
I think it's just that, is realizing that we as Black people have been, whether you want to agree or not, have started with a disadvantage, and to kind of even that playing field and just let us have the same opportunities or out of the starting gate that other families might have would be a great start. I don't have all the answers, so I don't know, but even just talking about it is helping, I'm sure.
I bleed the same color that you bleed on the on the inside. I said, we all have bones on the inside the same. I said, we're all like a book. And that's one thing I used to say to kids when I worked in the schools as an educational assistant. I used to tell them that we're all like a book, and we all have a different story on the inside, but we all have pages on the inside with a story. But the outside of the book might be a different cover. But that doesn't make us any different. We're all people, and we all have feelings, and everybody should be treated the same.
And so for me, as painful as those experiences have been, I always know that God's in control at all times. I always know that my family members would say to me, Tanika, we're good, we're all right. We want you to continue to fight the good fight, and teach all of our generation and future generations that no matter what is thrown at you, no matter how painful it is, you have a responsibility to get up and to say, okay, and keep on pushing.
And I feel that definitely we're getting more diverse as a world as a whole. And I feel like 50 years from now, we won't have the same hardships or the same microaggressions and subliminal racisms that we have now. But that's what I hope. I hope that the world is going to be a little more accepting.
So showing great character matters. Even in the face of adversity, your character matters.
And that's what we have to do. That's what I hope for, is everybody just understanding a little bit more about each other. Less hate. Open your eyes. Look at the bigger picture.
Now is the time to take a stand to make Canada equitable for all citizens who live here. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms of 1982 is part of our Constitution that is supposed to protect each of us, regardless of the color of our skin.
Back down on my knees. Oh, there've been times that I thought I couldn't last for long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gon' come. Oh, yes it will.
So it is my sincere hope that you've gained insight to my community, which has been in Alberta and other Western Canadian provinces for well over 115 plus years, and we're still facing human rights challenges. But we have and will continue to positively contribute to this place we call home. As the children in the film said, we all belong here, so let's just get along. This is my hope for you to strive for also. So if you're interested in viewing any of the documentaries or guides, or if you have any questions or comments, you can always email me or check out our website for some of the documentaries. Thank you so much for viewing this documentary and listening to me.